Hello and welcome to Cole Red Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Cole Red. Thank you for joining me. So this is my second video of the day, and I don't normally do that, but there is so much going on in the game right now that I thought we really needed a second video. I hope you watched the first video. It was a planning video all about the Blade Master Titan event that is currently going on in the game. Now, the best reward probably for that event is a 4-star Rathalos soul. And I want everybody to get that soul. So if you are interested in that, definitely go check out the first video. It's got a ton of information for you. But also, we're going to have this video, which is about turn attack tournaments, because there will be 5 of these tournaments in this Titan event. We currently have the first one, which is Fire Knight, and that has started already. We're going to be following that with a Spider tournament. Then I think it's Dragon, Ice Golem, and finally a second Fire Knight turn attack tournament at the end of the Titan event. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the differences between a normal dungeon tournament and a turn attack dungeon tournament. We're also going to break down the point system so that you can best plan how to get the most points out of your energy. That's really important to be efficient for these things. And then we're also going to jump into the Fire Knight dungeon to actually put together some team compositions that may work at various stages and give you some ideas about what you can do to make this work best for you. So there really is a lot of ground to cover, and it's already our second video, so we got to get a move on. Let's get started. Just a quick reminder, please hit the like button for this video. It really helps me out. It pushes this video out in front of more viewers, and that's not only helpful to me and the video and the channel, but hopefully this video will help more players that way. So thanks so much for all the support. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider joining our Discord community. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing we have to do when we're taking on a turn attack tournament is change our mentality about what to expect from the rewards. So when you're on this page, you can see this is the Fire Knight turn attack page. You want to click on info, and this is going to give you a breakdown of how you actually collect points during one of these tournaments. Now, as you can see, there are stages that are grouped together. This is normal and hard mode. And then you get tournament points based on the number of turns that you take. So the fewer turns that you take, the more points you get. Now, for most of these groupings of stages, you'll have at least one of each affinity. That means you want to take on the best affinity within that grouping. It's less important what the drop rates are for those stages, because you're not getting points based on the artifacts that you're collecting. Now, there is a Dungeon Divers event also going on right now, so that may be a consideration. But in general, we just want to think about the energy that goes into the stage, and then the affinity of the stage, because we want to complete it as quickly as possible, and then the points that we get. It's going to take a little bit of experimentation. You're probably going to want to try several of these stages, different groupings of stages, to see what's actually going to work best for you. So as you can see here, let's say we're talking about the stages 12 through 16. You can see that you'll get a minimum of 9 points there, and you'll get a maximum of 32. That's a really big range. But if you go down a grouping, the 8 to 11 stage, you can get 8 to 27 points. So if you are up, say, at stage 16, because that's better gear drops for you, and let's say you're only getting like 10 or 11 or 12 points, that's probably not as valuable as dropping down to the grouping below and potentially, say, even farming stage 8 and getting like 25, 26, 27 points. Remember that as you go down in stages, it actually costs less energy. So not only are you potentially getting more points at a lower stage, but you're getting more points with less energy. So your points per energy is going to increase. So the goal here isn't to get the highest stage that you can complete, but rather to get the most points based on the number of turns it takes to complete that dungeon. Now, if you look at the hard modes, there are only 10 hard mode stages, and they're grouped 1 through 4, 5 through 9, so you have one of each affinity there, and then there is stage 10 that is its own grouping. Now, for most players, if you can complete stage 25, you're going to be able to complete probably the hard modes, maybe 1 through 4, for most of the dungeons. Fire Knight may be the exception, but for most of the dungeons, especially Ice Golem and Dragon, you can probably go right up to, stage 1, 2, 3, or 4 for hard mode. Pick the affinity that works best. because you're going to get a few more points here for the same amount of energy. Remember that hard mode only takes 20 energy per run, just like stage 25. So it's going to be very rare that somebody's actually going to get the most value out of stage 25. Typically, you're going to farm somewhere between stage 20 and 24 if you can, or you're going to go up to 1 to 4 out of hard. Now, for Fire Knight, you need a completely different team, so that might not be true for this tournament, but we'll talk about that when we actually get into the dungeon run. Now, remember that you do want the 2,650 point reward here. It might be less for you if you're not level 60 yet, account level 60 yet, I think, but this should be the same points that most people have. But these are the 50 points that we want. We want these Titan event points. So yeah, I think they're called Blade Master points. So we want the Blade Master points. That's really important. You can decide whether or not you want to actually push in the tournament or if you want to go for additional rewards. Like I said, there is a Dungeon Divers event going on right now. We'll take a quick look at that so you can see what the point totals look like there. Okay, so here's the Dungeon Divers event reward track. And as you can see, everybody's probably going to want these first 100 points. If you're going for the 4-star soul, there are 1,700 points in the total in the event, and you need 1,000 for the 4-star soul. So that means you can skip 700. But you don't want to skip entire events. Generally, there will be one summon rush. That's probably something you're going to want to skip if you're a free-to-play player. And I expect there to be probably a reward of around 300 points. Hopefully not more, but hopefully about 300, maybe 200 if we're lucky, points in the summon rush. So if you're skipping that, you're already potentially giving away 300 points. So you could go up to this batch of 100 points here at 4,350. Now, the entire Fire Knight tournament and the entire Spider tournament can be done within this dungeon tournament, or I'm sorry, this Dungeon Divers event. So if you can fit both of those tournaments in here, that might allow you to get the 4,350. Remember that these points are based on your drops, whereas the points for the tournaments are going to be based on the number of turns you take. So as a result, you may have to balance out your expectations. Maybe you can get more points per energy at a lower stage for the Turn Attack tournament, but you might still want to go slightly higher up because the points per energy in the Dungeon Divers might be better. I'm going to show you a loot table, like a drop table, that can help you decide maybe where you want to farm. Okay, so here we are on a yumilove.net. I come here occasionally. It's a very good website. I know I often bring you to hellhades.com, but this is another great website that has a ton of information about Raid Shadow Legends. And I like this page because it has a bunch of drop tables, tells you, loot rates, drop rates for everything in the game, basically. It doesn't include the hard mode dungeons yet. I don't know if anybody's done that math, but if you look here at the dungeon loot table and drop rates, you can actually see that there is a breakdown of the points per energy for Dungeon Diver events and Dungeon Diver, and I'm sorry, not Dungeon Diver. So Dungeon Diver events and regular dungeon tournaments. So here you can see if you're looking for Dungeon Diver points, the best stages are stage 16 and stage 20. You can even go down here at stage 7, which is not bad, or stage 3. So if you're looking for Dungeon Divers points, you can see stage 3 here is actually the best out of the whole thing. So the tournament points are not important this time around. We don't care about this bottom row. You can just block that out because it's a turn attack tournament. But normally if you had a regular dungeon tournament, you would want to find the points in this row and then the points in this row that match up the best for you based on where you are. But again, turn attack tournament, so the bottom row doesn't matter. So look at your Dungeon Diver points, look at the points that you're getting, like experiment with the points that you're getting at different stages of each dungeon, and then you can figure out the best place to farm. So, if you can do stage 16, and stage 16 is just as good as other stages in terms of turn attack, or even a little bit worse, it might be more valuable to get the Dungeon Diver points and just spend a little bit of extra. You're going to have to spend more energy anyway if you're going for the full Dungeon Divers clear. So the turn attack shouldn't matter too much. But there may come a point where one of the turn attacks, like you can just barely do it because you're running out of energy or something, and you want to be super efficient there. Or maybe you don't need to do the full Dungeon Divers clear. So it's entirely up to you. But I wanted to give you this information because this is a really good chart. I'll try to put a link to this chart in the description, or maybe to the Yumi Love page in the description of this video. Okay, here we are in Fire Knight's Castle. Now, what we just figured out from the drop loot table and then the points table for the turn attack is that stage 3 could be a really great place to farm. It's going to be relatively quick for pretty much everybody. It's going to give you really good return on investment for your Dungeon Divers event. And then, you're not going to get a ton of points for your turn attack, but you should be at the top of the range in terms of points for the energy level. And so this could be really good. By the way, these energy levels are based on super rates. Now, normally you would say you can get the same points for the lowest stage in a turn attack tournament. So it would be better to farm stage 1 for turn attack than stage 3, because you get the same number of points for all 3. And stage 1 has the fewest stats on the enemies, so you're going to clear them the fastest. However, because there's a Dungeon Divers event tournament going on, we want to be efficient for that. The efficiency for Dungeon Divers is going to be more important, because there's going to be a higher energy requirement there. You're going to do the turn attack just fine. You're going to do the turn attack just fine. But if you are doing the turn attack without the Dungeon Divers, then you want to think about doing the lowest stage, or, the friendliest stage in terms of affinity in any grouping. So with the Dungeon Divers, we would be looking at 3 or 7. You can see when the energy starts to change, right? That's where we want to go. We want to go to the highest stage before the energy changes. So 3 or 7. The next stage would be 11. The next stage would be 16. The one after that would be 20, and the one after that would be 24, and then we have 25. 25 is generally a bad stage to farm for the turn attack tournaments. And there are a bunch of reasons. One is it's much more efficient to farm stage 24 for Dungeon Divers. It's also much more efficient in terms of energy just for the turn attack as well. And if you want to spend 20 energy, you may as well be spending 20 energy in the hard mode dungeon. And again, these first 4 stages all give the same number of points, but you could farm any of these 4 stages. And for Dungeon Divers, stage 4 is going to be the best. In fact, if you can actually farm these with fewer attacks, you want to go all the way up to stage 9 or stage 10, whatever you can get. The maximum number of stages that you can get with a decent return on that turn attack points chart is what you want to do. What I have found is that the stats ramp up as soon as you get to stage 6. Getting past stage 6 for a turn attack tournament is going to actually be pretty hard. You can see I haven't actually reached stage 6 in Fire Knight. I've gotten all of the other dungeons to stage 10 hard mode, but this is the hardest one and I'm not there yet. So I'm going to be farming probably stage 4, because this is way better return in terms of points for Dungeon Divers and points for the turn attack tournament compared to stage 25, which is the exact same energy. I can actually do this in the same number of turns as I can do stage 25. And so it's just better to do the hard mode. But if you are doing one of the normal stages, again, consider both the Dungeon Divers option and the turn attack tournament option. So if you're just doing turn attack, lowest stage in the group. If you're doing Dungeon Divers as well, highest stage in the group for the energy. Okay, so now let's talk about what it takes to put together a good Fire Knight turn attack team composition. There's always 3 tasks that we need to complete here in Fire Knight. The first is we need to deal with the waves. The second is we need to break the shield on the boss. And then the third is we need to actually kill the boss, preferably by keeping him turn meter controlled while we damage him. Now, you may have heard me talk about wave content before. I usually say that there are 3 ways to handle any wave content in the game, including the waves in dungeons like Fire Knight. The first is that you tank it up. That's usually the simplest way. You just get more survivable than the waves themselves, and you outlast them. You bring in heals, you bring in revives, you maybe bring in cleanses and block debuffs. You only have a few damage dealers to get yourself through the waves. It's very reliable, but it's slow. The second way is bringing a lot of CC. It is relatively obvious that if the enemy never gets a chance to go, they can't kill you. So just by keeping them locked down, again, kind of like the tanking method, you have a lot of time. It's not usually super fast, but it's very reliable. The third way is to just nuke the waves out. Now, the higher you go in the stages, the harder it is to nuke out waves in a 1-shot or a 2-shot. So that's something that I don't normally recommend for free-to-play players until you kind of get to end game. But in the Fire Knight turn attack tournament, or any turn attack tournament, you can choose the stage that you're running. And you don't have to run the highest stage that you can complete, because you don't really care about the drop rates. You just care about the number of turns. So in general, for turn attack tournaments, it's worth building a nuke the wave kind of team, as long as you can still do the other 2 tasks, break the shield and hopefully control the boss so that you kill him relatively quickly. So if you have a tanky team or a CC team here for normal Fire Knight, not hard mode, but normal Fire Knight, you want to think about swapping that team out for a harder hitting wave clearing team. Now, in this particular composition that I've got above me, there are some considerations here. Again, don't worry about the champions, but just think about the roles here. First of all, I have a speed aura in my lead. I don't have to have a speed aura if I'm going into a relatively low stage where the speeds are really low. You could go with an attack percentage aura here for dungeons. There are a bunch of champions that really give really large attack percentage auras for dungeons. So for instance, I think I have one right here. So Nishak here actually gives a really good aura that we could potentially use. Again, if you don't need the speed, remember that if you make each turn count more, then you have to take fewer turns overall. Speed is usually a way to stay ahead of the turn meter of the enemies. But in this case, as long as you're this much ahead, you're fine. So I don't necessarily need a speed aura like I normally run here. I could potentially pull this champion out and put an increased attack or increased defense there, whatever is going to increase my damage. However, in this particular team composition, this is an ally attack champion. Now, ally attack champions can be really valuable in turn attack tournaments because when they fire their ally attack skill, that counts as one attack. So I'm literally going to get 5 attacks for 1 turn count. That's all it is. It counts as 1 turn. So Cardiel is going to go and everybody's going to attack, and that's going to be 1 turn. So there is value here in having him, and I don't have an increased attack aura on this team. So I'm just going to go with the speed, and that's going to be fine. But consider your aura carefully. Okay, now I have Deacon Armstrong. Deacon Armstrong is going to give me a couple of things. He's going to give me turn meter fill and a decreased defense and a leech and a double hit on his A1. Maybe he's not the perfect champion for a turn attack team because of the extra turn mechanic. I don't love that, but I do need a drop defense champion to help me clear out the waves. You could actually bring in a AoE weaken champion. Lydia would be absolutely perfect if you have your Lydia because she gives you a decreased defense and a weaken AoE on the same skill. She also gives you an increased speed buff, which lets you get back around to your turns more quickly. Now, there is an advantage to getting back around to your turns more quickly, and that is that if the enemy doesn't get a chance to go, then you don't have to worry about those turns, right? You basically reduce the animations, reduce the skills that get used, reduce the turn count, and reduce your time in the dungeon. So that's all great. So the decreased attack here is really going to help. Now, Sissia Flametongue is my wave clear. She also has an extra turn mechanic. Again, not perfect here. She is Cardiel's duo, which helps create additional ally attacks. So I'm going to get a bonus out of that. Again, an ally attack is just 1 turn. And also she's very good at wave clear. And so she's going to help me out here. Now, Vizix is here primarily to slow the boss and turn meter control him. So she's really my only turn meter control champ here. Actually, Newt is also a turn meter control champ, but I don't want to go too hard on the turn meter control. I need the minimum amount of turn meter control that I can get so I can really maximize damage. Now, Newt is going to be God tier here. He's not actually great at wave clear. He's okay. He does some wave clear. He's got a pretty good AoE, but he's really here for boss killing. So I want to make sure that when I set up my AI, he's set up to maximize his damage dealing on the boss. You could go with a reset champion in here. So for instance, if you had Kymar or something like that, that might actually even speed up your wave clear and allow Newt to get back around to his single target nuke on the boss more quickly. So consider a reset champion as well. So I do want to give you a quick look at the AI here, just so you have an idea of how to optimize your team for Fire Knight. Remember that anything that doesn't help you clear the waves, you basically want to avoid using in rounds 1 and 2. And then anything that's going to help you knock that boss's shield down as an opening in round 3, you want to have available. So you may want to shut off in round 2. Okay, so if we're looking at Cardiel's skills, you can see I've turned off his cleanse in round 1, and I've turned it off in round 2. In addition, I really need his ally attack available for round 3. So he can use it as an opener, but then he should shut it off. And he may not even have it available because he may use it in round 1 and not have it available. If he doesn't have it available as an opener, he won't use it. So either he'll open with it and then shut it off, or he just will shut it off the whole time. That means round 3, I can use it as an opener, and that's going to break the shield for me. This is where ally attack is extremely valuable. Now, if you are in lower stages of Fire Knight, it's still useful to have an ally attack champion, but you may not need one if you've only got, 5 or 8 or whatever stacks of shield. You may just be able to break it with, your Cold Heart or, Wuzgar or somebody like that who has a lot of multi-hits on their A1. Now for Deacon, it's a similar thing. I don't care what he does in round 1. I don't really care what he does in round 2. I do want him to open with his A1 in round 3. Remember, he's my fastest champion. He's going to go first. So he's actually going to go before Cardiel's ally attack. So I want to get that double hit out there. That's going to help me break that shield. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because I'm putting Newt all the way at the back of my team. He's going to be the last champion to go in the ally attack. You can see Vizix is just in front of him. So if I can break the shield before the ally attack, that means Vizix A1 and Newt's A1 may actually decrease the turn meter of the Fire Knight during the ally attack. So that's going to be really helpful. I'm going to have Deacon open with his double hitter. That should help me get some turn meter control on the ally attack. Now for Sissia, I really don't care what she does most of the time. For round 3, I could have her open with her triple hit A1. That would be great if I needed to break the shield. But she's actually going in the middle of the turn order, and so the shield's already going to be broken. So if she has her HP burn, I'm just going to let her use that. I could turn off her HP burn in round 2. Like I could do an opener and then don't use. I could do that if I really wanted it available for her to open with in round 3. In fact, that's what we'll do. We'll just save that right there. Okay, now for Vizix, again, round 1, I don't care. In round 2, I do care because I want to make sure that she has her slow available for round 3. So she's not going to use her slow. She can use her provoke instead. They're both really good, and those are going to control the wave. The provoke actually hits harder anyway. But in round 3, she's going to open with her slow. Now, this is really important because that's going to make the limited crowd control that I have, or the limited turn meter reduction that I have for the Fire Knight work more effectively. But I might not actually even need it, say at stage 20. Like, he might not have enough speed to be a problem, and I could just use the damage. But we're going to do this for safety's sake. Now, finally, I have my Newt. You can see in round 1, I don't care what he does. In round 2, I don't really care what he does. In round 3, I don't really care what he does because his normal priority is going to be his A3. Now, what I could do if I wanted to here in round 2 is I could turn off his A2. This is a weaken, but I should be able to get the weaken from Sissia Flametongue. So Sissia Flametongue also has a weaken, and she has a decreased defense. The decreased defense actually won't happen here because you need 2 enemies, and Fire Knight is the only enemy, but I do have Deacon's decreased defense. So I have the decreased defense here, I have the weaken here, and therefore I don't need Newt's A2. So if I wanted to shut this off, I could, and then he would just use his A1, but it really doesn't matter with this particular composition because I think he's just going to open up with his A3 and crush it. But let's go ahead and say don't use here. Okay, so now let's jump into stage 20 and see how this works. I'm just going to let this go on full auto. I can't use the super raids. I need the energy. But let's go ahead and see how this works at stage 20. Now, remember to consider your affinity. In this particular case, you can see I'm bringing no magic champions in. Everybody is either neutral affinity or strong affinity. And obviously Newt, as my major damage dealer, I want him strong affinity, and he is. So this should work really well. Okay, let's go ahead and fire it up. All right, so here we get into the first wave. That decreased defense is really going to help. Again, Deacon is also strong affinity, so he's not going to weak hit. So really consider the affinity of your champions depending on the stage that you're going into. You can see Sissia Flametongue's damage there. She gets her extra turn mechanic and clears the wave pretty fast. So that only took 7 turns. That's not too bad. You could probably do a little bit better if you didn't have extra turn champions like I do. Right? I have 2 extra turn champions, but maybe you could do it in 5. That would be good. Now, again, remember when Cardiel joins as an ally attack, he will always join Sissia's attack like here. That doesn't actually count as an additional turn. This second wave is where you get a lot of value out of a reset champion. You could even use a Renegade here. Could be really great. Renegade does have a slow, I believe, on her A1. So she does also add value to the fight for the boss. But yeah, you can decide whether or not you get more value out of reducing turns here on the second wave, or you get more value out of reducing turns on the boss. Okay, so now here we're going to have Deacon go first, and then we should go into our ally attack, and the shield will break, and we'll get some turn meter control at the end of it. And now the boss has no turn meter. We get the slow from Vizix right away, and now it's just about pumping the damage. And again, every time Sissia goes, you see Cardiel goes, and that doesn't count as a turn, which is why I've brought them in here. So I'm hoping that even though she has an extra turn mechanic, his additional attacks on her turns maybe balance that out a little bit. And there's Newt knocking it down. So what we can see here, okay, and this is important, is you want to think about the return that you get per energy. So let's check the drop first. That's important. Unfortunate. But we got 31 points here for 16 energy. That's pretty good. If we do a quick little calculation, we can figure out that's almost 2 points per energy. Not quite, just under 2 points per energy. Now, it may be that this is variable. You can see my best is 38 there. It's the same team. So maybe I can do this in as little as 38. That might get me 32 or 33 points. But it's roughly 2 points per energy. So now let's go experiment with a different stage and see how we do. All right, so I'm going to actually jump in here to stage 24 with the exact same team, by the way. I'm not going to change up my team, although you certainly could if you are changing affinities. But this is the same affinity as stage 20. And like I said, I don't want to do stage 25. Stage 24 is much more efficient for Dungeon Divers points. And if I'm going to use 20 energy, I may as well be doing hard mode. We'll do that next. So I'm going to jump in here to stage 24. We're going to run the exact same team. And you can see now it's 18 energy. Remember, we almost got 2 points per energy for stage 20. Now let's see how many points per energy we get for stage 24. Okay, so here you can see we cleared this in 81 turns, a little bit slower, few more turns, but I got 34 points for 18 energy. So again, it's just a little bit below 2 points per energy. It's probably more efficient to farm stage 20 than stage 24 for me with this team, but I wanted to check. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go up to hard mode, and we're going to try out, I think I'm going to try stage 4. This is also force affinity. I do have to use a different team here because of the different mechanics. So I am going to jump in here. I'm going to have to swap teams. Remember that you can't use turn meter decrease the regular way on Fire Knight hard mode. You need to use freezes instead. So I'm going to pull out Vizix, and I'm going to pull out Deacon Armstrong, and I'm going to put in your Carl and Blazar. I'm going to stick with my Wave Clear and my Nuker in the same affinity. But again, you'll notice Blazar is also strong affinity here. That was by design. So again, I'm trying to get the fewest number of turns by getting the most damage out as I can. So I'm going to run this, and then we're going to check the energy return. Okay, so here I am at the end of stage 4 hard mode. And you can see I actually did this a little bit faster than I did stage 24. I think 24 was like 91 turns or something. You can see my best here is 73, although this run was 84. So I'm actually pulling down 45 points for 20 energy. Now for both stage 20 and 24, it was a little bit under 2 points per energy. But as you can see here, I am over 2 points per energy. I'm getting about 2.25 points per energy. So that's a much better return on investment. In addition, it's going to give me more points for the Dungeon Divers tournament. So I think that this is the place that I'm going to end up farming. But just to show you that you don't have to be here at endgame, I am going to try one more thing. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here to stage 3. Now, you could do stage 3, stage 7, whatever it is, but I want to show that the points that you can get down here are still pretty good. And now, granted, it depends on the champions, the gear, and all that stuff in terms of how many turns you're going to get. But you can complete a turn attack tournament at stage 3 very well. And remember, on that chart that we saw in a Yuumi Love, stage 3 is actually really good for Dungeon Divers points per energy. So what I've done here is I built a team. Again, these are very well built end game champions, but they're accessible champions. So you could potentially do what I'm about to do with a lot less powerful gear than what I've got on these champions. So I put Royal Guard in front. So he's got an increased attack in dungeons by 35%. That means every hit's going to be really hard. And then down here at stage 3, I think the Fire Knight only gets like 5 stacks of shield, maybe 6, something like that. And remember that both of these champions have quad hits on various skills. So I'll just show you the AI really quickly. We know that each wave is going to happen like with one shot. So Coldheart is faster. So Coldheart's going to open with her A2. That should one-shot wave 1. And then in round 2, unfortunately, she's going to use her flurry of arrows, which is going to kill probably 4 of the 5 minions. And then Royal Guard will take the rest of them down with takedown. And then when we get to the boss, Coldheart will open with her flurry of arrows, which will be 4 hits. And we got 4 hits on that A1. And then Royal Guard is going to use his A3, which is also 4 hits. That'll break the shield. And then put 3 hits onto the boss, which would also give him turn meter decrease and a decreased speed if he survives. And that would allow Coldheart to then close out with her Heartseeker. So we shouldn't have more than maybe 5 or 6 turns here. Maybe 7. We'll have to see. So let's run this real quick. Only 8 energy, remember. So A2, 1 shot. A1's going to leave 1 person alive, 2 people alive there. And then hopefully we can do this in 2 turns. 4, yep. So that's 5 turns. 5 turns total, 10 seconds. Really quick. And we got 12 points for 8 energy. Now that's 1.5 points per return. But again, this just goes to show that you can still get these turn attack tournaments done at a relatively low stage. And remember that this is actually the most efficient stage for dungeon divers in terms of energy. So if you're relatively new to the game, you don't need a lot here to get this thing done. Okay, so that is it for this one. Good luck in your turn attack tournaments. Let me know in the comments below if this video has been helpful and what your team composition is, regardless of what stage you happen to be doing it on, because I always love to hear about cool team compositions. All right, that is it for me. Thanks for hanging out. I have been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.